Alright, hello everyone. This video is about Uranus going retrograde in Aries. Just started to rain. We're gonna do this video and hopefully the rain won't get my phone too wet. Because this is the only spot I'm able to find and it's getting dark. So yesterday I was walking downtown where I'm at right now, and I met these Jesus people that like to give blessings, free blessings. So I'm all about it. I have a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction with Neptune in Sag. You know, I'll take blessings from any spiritual source. So I go and I connect with them, and at some point during the blessings, one man had this vision of a horse. And he's like, oh, horses are really important for you. Pay attention to horses. A horse might come into your life or something. Do you ride horses? Okay, so I'm going to get back to that story in a moment. Let's talk about Uranus. Before I go into the retrograde, let's define the nature of Uranus. And I have a great analogy that came to me recently. If you're playing a video game, better, if you're in the video game, let's say you're Luigi, and you're, going through the boards, you might pounce on the bad guy, bump your head on the thing, eat a mushroom, get magical powers, and you're just coasting through the game. From the perspective of unenlightened Luigi, there's almost the sense of, I don't know what's going to come next. You're just playing the game, and this monster comes and runs after you, and suddenly you have to shoot it with your fireball, and it's been a while since I played Mario Brothers, but you get the idea. From the point of view of the video game programmer, all the boards are set already. So if there are 10 levels, first level, second level, third level, all levels are already established. And so the limited consciousness of Luigi, the one playing the video game or going through the different stages, won't necessarily have awareness of the larger programming of the video game. And so elements can pop up that seemingly feel non sequitur or irrelevant, or don't have context to the existing reality that's being played. But from the point of view of the video programmer, it's like, oh no, that little thing that's showing up right now is going to come back in 3 levels. So you might have a foreshadowing by hearing the melody that will be played in a few rounds, or you might see a character that's going to pop up for you. Same thing with the past. From the point of view of the programmer, the whole video game is done. It's set. So whether it's a earlier stage or a later stage, it's already established. And that's an important principle when it comes to Uranus. Uranus is beyond Saturn. It's beyond time. So to understand Uranus, we have to really take ourselves completely away from any time-based linear cause and effect thinking. Uranus represents the vibrational intelligence that precedes manifest creation. And most of us are, according to the extent that we're identified with time and space and me and mine, we're going to maybe to some degree have an awareness of this impersonal, non-time-based reality that's operative now, even while we're experiencing time-space reality. And this is where we can have premonitions, flashes of the future or the past lives, future lives. We can also see symbols and number sequences, archetypes. Archetypes reflect vibrational essences, and essence is what comes before manifestation. So we can see different archetypes manifesting and not even understand them. And for these archetypes to manifest, understanding isn't required, because in a sense, regardless of our comprehension, the video game is programmed. So we're actually receiving imprints and archetypes and symbols all the time. But for the most part, we're not aware of that. We don't realize that everything that manifests physically is reflecting a vibrational, intelligent essence that precedes its manifestation. And even the word precede, by the way, isn't the most accurate word for Uranus, because precede involves time. So it's the foundation of, before cause and effect comes into a play. Now, what most of us experience is total fear when it comes to actually looking at reality as it is. So it's generally difficult to do that if we're not 100% clear about the true nature of reality. So what happens with Uranus is we're receiving these impulses, but we're going to filter everything according to our existing framework of understanding. So Uranus isn't the left brain or the right brain, it's the higher mind. The left brain has to take it in, give it in, categorize it as information, and then we have to interpret it through the right brain. Things have to intuitively fit and line up for us. And sometimes what's coming might not have any context to the life that we're experiencing. So for most souls, there's an orientation to just hold on to the past. Now, Jeff Green talks about Uranus on 3 levels. Basically, when we strip away all of our suppressed ways of thinking, where we kind of lock ourselves into, nope, this is the life, this is how things are, this is who I am. We strip away all of that suppression and that conditioning. We're left with Uranus, which is the individuality of each soul. And that everything is individuality first. And individuality and personality are not the same. The soul has its own individuality. And that individuality isn't even a developed individuality. It doesn't become. It's what it always has been and what it always will be. So our liberation process in certain stages of awakening, when we strip away our identification with the known past, with conditions, so we're no longer ground and operating only in Saturn world, we begin to abide as the observer of our reality. And we realize that we always have been what we are. We always are what we always will be. So coming into that place of awareness, though, means letting go and being willing to not fit in to the world that we're familiar with, to not fit into all the different social boxes and categories that we otherwise identify with. And so for most souls, we have where Uranus represents the inherent individuality of the soul, but for most souls, that's going to be suppressed at various degrees. Most souls on this planet, we're going to find inklings of that Uranian individuality through inventive behavior. And in different stages of evolution, that will come up in different ways. So you might have a soul in consensus state, let's say Uranus and Aries, that invents a new sport, right? Or more personally, they'll realize they don't have to follow the crowd. They can actually do things their own way and be a trailblazer. So they'll start a new paradigm, but it's going to be within a consensus level. What we find with Uranus is we can be inventive forever. We can create new things and think of fun, new, interesting ways, but that's not the highest expression of Uranus. It's actually only just touching upon, really, it's almost a metaphor for true liberation. It's almost a replacement. Instead of being liberated, we say, I'm going to be unique and creative and inventive, but it's still happening within the personality. There's still a someone being creative and different and inventive and avant-garde and standing out. The awakening that happens with Uranus is a realization of one's true self, and that true self, of course, cannot be defined. So we go into the no mind place. We go into no definition, and yet things are what they are. When we enter into that realm of clarity with Uranus, we just begin to find out the interconnectedness, the web of reality, because we're no longer looking at things from a personal point of view, interpreting everything according to time, space, personal notions, ideas. So we come back to the people who were offering the Jesus blessing, and they saw a horse. I don't know what it means, but I'm just sharing this as a good example. My immediate reaction was, well, that's probably not literal. I'm a Sagittarius. I'm a traveler. And the impulses that I've been receiving from my own soul have been about being wild and free. And in my own sensing, horses very much represent that. And the thing about horses is horses aren't horses. Horses are horses, but they're also not horses. Just like you're not you. You're you, but you're not. We can go there. Right? So we can operate, and on the Saturn level of, when it comes to Saturn, we're going to operate in the Saturn dimension only relative to the way our consciousness is conditioned to operate within form. The boundaries, the constructs, the definitions, the parameters of time and space aren't inherent. They're only relevant. They're only relevant for the ways that they're relevant. There are people that don't have to age. There are people that don't die. There are people that can fly. That's my view, at least, that there are people out there who can do that. So another thing about Uranus before we go into the retrograde is coming back to the tarot card idea. Everything's an archetype. We don't always understand what that archetype is representing because our mind's conditioned according to certain ideas and parameters. But there's this quality that develops as we mature spiritually where we don't have to take things personally. We can see everything is reflecting back to us reality. And it's where we start to take things personally. We give it personal context. We actually hold energy in place. We lock it in place. And that's where trauma comes in. Someone may have said something to us that hurt us. And we build a story around it. Interestingly, with Uranus, we have long-term memory. And the memories that we have, the things that we retain, that we remember, are less accurate than the things we don't remember. I may have said this once before. Anyway, the reason why it's not accurate is because the mind is picking certain pieces. It's associating certain characteristics to the past. From the point of view of true Uranian consciousness, undivided, undifferentiated, there's 360-degree vision, sight, hearing, perception. It's raw data, unprocessed, unfiltered through the mind and interpretation. It's existing as it is prior to us giving it context. So when we become an observer, we remove ourselves from personal identification with things. That's ultimately how trauma is healed. We get the larger story. So we climb a mountain. And we can see everything from the bird's eye view. And we realize that everything's playing out as an archetypal expression of the one creation. And the deeper realization is it's all inside. And so we pull a tarot card, we see a person, someone acts a certain way to us. It's all reflecting our inner reality, which is the one reality, which is out here as well. So we have this teaching that the entire universe is inside of us. The entire cosmos is the inner community. And the extent to which we differentiate it as outside, that means we're living within parameters of time and space and separation. But Uranus is an entire ecosystem, and it's only one reality. So think of astrology. The stars are out there, but obviously they're in here too. That's why you joined NPA, because we're studying ourselves as well. So that's Uranus. So Jeff Green, the last thing he says is, in terms of understanding the basics of Uranus, and I appreciate this notion, it's the blueprint of who we become in our most individuated state. Like the seed has a blueprint for the tree. Again, it's there beyond time, and just dependent on our own karma, how our consciousness is conditioned will determine the way in which we're operating through time and space. But that Uranian level, so, okay, whenever we have a planet that goes retrograde, a general guideline for approaching understanding about the retrograde planet is to think, what does it look like for that planet to be excessive? Because retrograde is always going to imply on some level a reviewing, revisiting, rethinking, and a separating from. Individuation happens with a retrograde archetype. And it sets us apart from the status quo way of living, how we are conditioned and used to operating in this world. So Mercury retrograde, we're stepping away from how we normally think, how we organize and communicate and relate to the linear functions of life. Uranus retrograde, we're taking a step back from our thinking, but not linear thinking. It's our higher mind thinking. It's the underlying projections, the stories, the network of consciousness that we are placing onto reality. What are some excessive Uranus functions? This will help us understand the retrograde. You can think of it in 3 ways. 1, with the Uranus and Aquarius in our chart, we can have a soul that is excessively into conspiracy theory, or reading signs, or Googling animal totems, looking at everything and taking it all on this level of, it's not literal, there's some sort of archetypal essence in it. And what happens when we kind of get stuck in that place, like with conspiracies or looking at everything as symbols, is we're in the head. Like we're living totally dissociated. It's not liberated Uranus, it's dissociated Uranus. Right? Because liberated is, yeah, we're removed. But this is like dissociated from life. So we're just stuck in our own little world. And it's the same thing that I was speaking about when it comes to the creative genius that can happen with Uranus, where we can be very inventive, but it's not full liberation. We can have an awareness of certain things being metaphorical, not literal. But we can take that to an extreme. For example, I know people that are very, very, very attuned to bioengineering and chemtrails and things like that. And one thing that I observe is these few people that I know, they take it to an extreme where there's a paranoia and things that, in my view, aren't necessarily bioengineering. It might just be a cloud. They personally believe that all clouds are bioengineered and the weather was taken over completely. And as I'm saying that, if you believe that, great, I'm sharing my view. But it's an example of a person that can really just live their life in conspiracy. And there's a paranoia, there's a fear in that, and that resonates with past life trauma, of course. Oftentimes we're the system existing in such a way where certain groups of people are being alienated, hurt, persecuted, and even humanity, where humanity is being taken advantage of and things like that. Or in a more subtle way, we can have a soul that's always looking at symbols, or like, oh, you're wearing an orange shirt today, and I had that dream last night, maybe I'm not supposed to go on this car ride, things like that. So another example, let me just look at my notes because I wrote these down. It would be overinvestment with certain groups and closed loops, closed circles that will just repeat the same kinds of thoughts. It might be a very revolutionary group, but the issue would be there's no evolution happening because the soul is identifying that these are my friends, this is my group, this is my way of living, this is my really new creative way of thinking, but it becomes stagnant and it becomes another Saturn reality. Okay, so, and the third one, I think I probably already said it. Oh yeah, so it's basically just dissociation or not wanting to contend. Like, I don't want to contend with fill in the blank, whatever Uranus house we're looking at, right? I don't want to do relationships. No, people have too many needs. Right? Obviously that's reflecting trauma, where there's trauma around relationships and needs being met and things that the soul has suppressed. Or no, I'm not going to, read a book or go to school because maybe trauma around going to school or when we were forced to read a book and things like that. So, not contending. So when Uranus goes retrograde, all these excessive behaviors are brought into our face because these are essentially all ways in which we project a reality that isn't actually real. And Jeff Green often spoke about Uranus going retrograde points to Neptune, which is kind of a dissolving of all of our projections. But in this case, it's more of a busting, because Uranus is anything that busts, anything that bursts. And that means that there's also an element of surprise that can come with Uranus. From the point of view of Luigi, it's surprising when all of a sudden this big monster comes on and it's like, whoa, I didn't expect that. I was, shooting fireballs and eating mushrooms. When we become more clear, when we sit in the seat of the programmer, we can actually observe the matrix of the program. And actually from that place, there's profound creative genius, because we're no longer bound up by projection. So when things are coming, we're receiving impulses, imprints, signs, dream messages, things that are coming that just don't seem to have any sequitur. Listen. And this is actually an opportunity to become more of an observer. The invitation with Uranus retrograde is to really quiet the mind. Notice the impulse to say, this is what's happening, this is where I'm going, this is what my life is about. This is where things are going. Uranus retrograde can feel like you take out a tarot deck and all the cards fall up, face up. It's like, what does that mean? If one card or two cards fell, I could interpret that. But the mind can become totally thrown off and confused. And that can be incredibly anxiety-ridden only because if the mind is trying to hold onto an existing context, a way of knowing and understanding reality, that it can say, this is my life, this is what's happening, this is where I'm going, and this is how I interpret things. An interesting phenomenon with Uranus retrograde, natally and in transit, is you might be receiving imprints, signs, sequences, impulses, dream messages, whatever, and you think it's going in a certain direction, and then it's not. And something completely else happens. And then you let go of that, and then that thing that you thought was going to happen actually happens. What's the teaching in this? The mind actually gets in the way of the cosmos unfolding naturally. So Uranus represents that principle of community. That ultimately, in a spiritual perspective, this is just one community. The difference between Uranus, by the way, and Neptune is there's only one source, and that source is manifest in as through everything. Whereas Uranus says that one source expresses intelligently through infinite individuality, and all individuality is one community. So Uranus says everything that we see here, all these stars and planets and people, we are one community of creation. And there's nothing that's excluded from that. And there's nothing that can be added to that either. It's a fascinating thing to think about. Like, there's nothing new. So everything we see is an expression of the archetypes of creation, expressing the intelligence of source. So that's a spiritual way of looking at Uranus. So we have this notion of community, and that everything is operating simultaneously. Within Uranus, there isn't a cause and effect reality. It's always simultaneous. And that's an important piece to understand. So if we're feeling that we're wanting to go in a certain direction, we have this impulse to make a certain choice, let go of something, go here. Uranus in Aries is liberating our instinctual impulses to act in resonance with our soul individuality. This is true the entire time that Uranus is in Aries. Uranus going retrograde, and during this eclipse season, with Mars ruling that Aries on the North Node, it's a potent time and potent invitation to actually, with Uranus ruling the South Node in Aquarius, right? I'll say a little more about that in a moment. It's a potent time to really connect to that liberating impulse. But there might be a lot of fear and confusion and uncertainty about where to go. Uranus in Aries is not about uncertainty and confusion. It doesn't want to sit forever thinking about its options. That's not how Uranus in Aries works. It's just going. And if it doesn't know, then it's not doing anything. The maturity of Aries is act, integrate. So with Uranus and Aries, you become an observer. You're looking at the actual path of your soul. And when that clarity is there, action happens spontaneously and effortlessly, almost like without thought. And if there's an experience where the notion of action or changing course, following your impulses, is met with fear, with dread, with uncertainty, or if there's a projection of, if I act, then fill in the blank. People won't understand. People will reject me. I won't be appreciated. I will be excommunicated. People will criticize me. I will be alone. I will lose my friends. Or friends being like, oh, I don't support you. Well, what an interesting association we've created. It means the association in our consciousness, because there's only one reality, only one community inside, is me being myself equals my friends don't support me or accept me. And if the friends are on the inside, it means me being myself means I'm not accepting that. I am not willing to contend or acknowledge and allow me to be what I am. There's an underlying judge. There's an underlying, this is not acceptable. I can't fit this into my box. This is not okay. And so we suppress it. And that can only show up in our environment. So wherever we project a story of dread and fear and possible terror in following the impulses of our own soul blossoming, we get to look at that as, where are we rejecting and alienating and not inviting all of ourselves? It's like if you go to a party, everyone that comes is invited. Even if you had a party and you're thinking, okay, this is a cowboys and Indians party. Everyone here is dressing up in some kind of theme. And then, someone comes and they're wearing an Asian outfit. Another person comes and they're in a disco gear. And another person is wearing Star Wars stuff and they look like Chewbacca. And it's like, well, geez, I was trying to have, cowboys and Indians party. And, Uranus and Aries is like a child. Aries is the child that's wanting the freedom to explore and do this, and it can be like, no, my way. This is my way. So if you think of everyone in this party showing up, your work during this time, however this party in your life is looking, and whatever characters on the inside are showing up, they're on the outside too, but it's only because they're on the inside. There's no separation. You can look at where you can let go of your boxes. Well, but I pulled a card and it was a cowboy and Indian. I'm supposed to have a cowboy and Indian party. Well, maybe you're interpreting that wrong. Maybe you thought it meant that. Maybe it was representing the archetypes of adventure and fun. Who knows? It is what it is, much more accurately than our interpretation of what it is. And if we can just be clear and observe, we'll find life is following suit with what it is prior to our understanding. So again, it's really easy for us to live in these boxes that say, this is the world that I'm living in, this is what I expect, and this is how it's going to look. This is how my awakening is going to look. And we can be so clear and intelligent, Uranus, intelligence, and completely miss the mark. Because we're liberating from our intelligence, really. We're liberating from our genius. We're liberating from all the ways in which we're good at maybe reading the signs. And I felt a strong emotion when I spoke about the idea of excluding people from the party. So I'm called to speak to this a little more clearly. During this time, we have the South Node in Aquarius. And the South Node at any particular time is really what's being released. Sometimes it's fruitive dynamics, other times it can be karmic pieces that are really coming up to be resolved and released. The ruler of that South Node, in this case Uranus, gives us more context and understanding for that. So Uranus and Aries, where is that transiting in your house, in your chart? What house is it in? What aspects is it creating? Where is Mars in your own chart? Right now we have Mars natally ruling that in Leo. It's going to be with a North Node for both of the eclipses, especially the big solar eclipse happening at the end of this month. Mars ruling this Uranus is really giving sense for what this liberation is about, how to move forward. Follow the heart. Follow the heart. Follow the heart. It doesn't have to make any sense. It doesn't have to line up with how we thought things were supposed to go. With Leo, Mars ruling that Uranus in Aries, you are a leader. You following your own soul path paves the way for the whole life that is to follow. And there's no one else that can reflect that to you. The difficult quality to this aspect is you have to go it alone. You have to really be willing to stand alone and trust the intelligence and the courage of your own being. And so there can be this profound anxiety that arises for us. And we might meet that anxiety by resorting to a known familiar way of being. But we'll know if it feels right. Because if it doesn't, we'll feel bored. We won't feel engaged. And here's the thing, especially with Mars on the North Node, the temptation really, because this is when you have this kind of signature, but then a planet ruling Uranus, Mars on the North Node, there can be a lot of growth and forward momentum. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's reflecting your highest potential for evolution, meaning you can be very creative and skilled at various things, and many opportunities and doors might be opening for you. It doesn't mean you have to say yes to it. You might be good and appreciated for your creativity, but if there's a deeper impulse arising for you for something else entirely, follow that. So I'm going to take a look back at my notes to see if anything else wants to be spoken. Yeah. And the last thing that I'll say is there's no need to act destructively or reactively. Like, well, I thought this was a cowboy and Indian party, and I guess it's not, so I'm just going to throw away all the costumes. That's the unliberated impulse that often happens with Uranus, especially when it's retrograde. It's reacting to this impulse for liberation, but doing it in a reactive way that creates more trauma. So we don't want to say, I'm not this, I'm that. That's just creating more identity, more story. That perpetuates the same issue, where then life has to show us, when again, I'm not that, and I'm not that. And it's like totally confusing. It totally shatters our worldview, our mind. That's where shocks with Uranus, especially retrograde, they're only shocks because we're identified with, I'm Luigi playing this video game. When we're sitting in the seat of the programmer, we have a greater objective, clear perspective. And we can actually see the future before it happens. And actually, shocks aren't always necessary. They're happening only to interface with where we're holding on to form. So it's like necessary, imploding energy that needs to be released. So being reactive perpetuates this pattern of holding on to identification. The invitation with Uranus retrograde is, I don't know what this party is about. I don't know I don't know who's coming. I don't know what the theme is. And you just get to be an observer. What do? You follow what's true. You notice your friends. I'm drawn to this person. I'm drawn to this person. I'm going to dance to this music and share myself. I'm going to enjoy this party. But stay true. Staying present to your own individual impulses. If everyone starts dancing the hora, don't just fit in and join the hora, even if they're like, oh, Ari, join, please. Don't. Alright, so we'll close the video here. Thank you all for this opportunity to share this with you, and may this season and this entire retrograde period be a time of becoming stronger and more confident and certain of our own soul path. And may we discover that we don't need to know our path to walk it, and that in fact, our knowing might just get in the way. So may we live more freely with an open heart as the Fool, trusting that our heart's impulses, our authentic calling from within is enough to guide the way, and everything in the universe comes into alignment. Because of the whole principle of one community, everything comes into alignment with our own awakening. We don't have to find our people ever. They come because they're really just inside. So we open up to what we are. The whole universe falls into place. Much love to you all.